Welcome back, everyone. We are now on episode 6 of MKTV. This is an interview series that I started where I interview cool people in the industry, and we got a really cool guest with us today. You may know him from Halo, or maybe a Law and Order episode many years back. We have Jeff. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Thank you, Dale.
It's very good to have you, an absolute legend in the gaming scene. So it's an honor to have you today.
Well, man.
The first question I want to ask you: what got you into voice acting, like in general?
Well, I think like a lot of people, when I was a kid, I would do voices I'd heard in cartoons. So, I'd do Mickey Mouse or Pluto or not Pluto. What's the other one? Goofy. Yeah, Pluto doesn't talk. I might do Rocky or Bullwinkle. Hey, Rocky, stuff like that. But so that was really kind of how I got started. And then I got involved in theater. I began acting when I was in junior high school, second year of junior high school. I never stopped. I just kept doing it after that. And I moved to Seattle from the Midwest. Seattle's in the Pacific Northwest, and Cedar Rapids, Iowa is where I had been raised at that point. And I joined a theater company, and a lot of people who produce commercials came to see our work. They loved, we were kind of a wild experimental group. This is way back in the 1970s. Right? Yeah, that's right. And so I was offered work as a voiceover actor. And I thought, sure, that sounds great. No problem. That's exactly how easy it was. My career has been, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but stupidly easy at so many points, where I should have had to work a lot harder to do something. It just kind of plopped into my lap, like doing voice work. And there was a commercial producer in Seattle, great, great guy who's since passed on, sadly. And he liked having actors, not voice people, because, voice actors have that kind of, I'm an announcer. And, he would have us do that, but as a joke, and then we played other characters and stuff. He was great. And started working with him. And then the engineer who he worked with, he and I got along like a house on fire. And he would often recommend me to people. So for the longest time, I was just sort of going from job to job because people had heard about me. And, after a while, I was getting auditions. I'd go in for that. And then one day I got a call from an agent who said, I understand you don't have an agent. Would you be interested in my representing you? And I said, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Another instance where, it was just stupid how easy it all was. And then that was the agent who called me one day to say, you've got an audition out at Microsoft where I'd done some things before. It's for a new game they're doing. It's like, oh, okay, great. What time and who do I talk to and all that kind of stuff. And what's the game called? She said, I think they said Halo, you know, but that's how I ended up doing that. And that's how my voice career got started.
That iconic role just from that moment right there.
Yeah.
Crazy. When you were saying, you got an agent and then they said, "Hey, we're going to call you, but we're calling you because there's an audition from Microsoft for Halo." Now, did you expect when getting that audition and, getting the role, did you expect Halo to be as culturally big as it has been and how
No.
big of an impact it's had on the gaming world?
Absolutely. Nobody did. Nobody did. I mean, Steve Downs tells a very funny story that you may have heard. He's Master Chief, of course. And evidently, about a year or so after he had done the work that he did on the game, or at least it was some period of time, his son came in to him. He had been playing on a game downstairs. Steve didn't know what. And his son said, Dad, are you in Halo? Are you Master Chief in Halo? And Steve went, oh yeah, that sounds kind of I think I did do that. And then apparently everybody in the neighborhood came over to meet the famous father. But none of us knew. Marty O'Donnell, who was in charge of the game, had no idea. I mean, he had a very low number of units. He thought if we sold those, it would be a hit. And of course, it surpassed that in no time at all. Nobody was expecting it to. I mean, everybody had hopes, I guess, for the voice actors. I think a lot of people don't realize about the voice actors is that when you get hired, you generally only know what you're doing. You don't know what the other actors are doing. I didn't know for the longest time what was going on in the game, and Jen Taylor is one of my best friends. But I would ask her questions and she couldn't tell me a lot of things because we all sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, and she couldn't tell me about stuff going on in the game. I remember I was like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "It's me. I'm not going to tell anybody." But so we go in and we do our work and then we go away, and nobody told me that the first game was a big, big hit.
Wow.
I think starting with the first game, the people at Microsoft sent me a copy of the game, and it was like, thanks. I said, are you going to give me an Xbox as well? And they were like, no. And I was like, well, okay, then I don't know, I had no way of playing it. I've got two kids, and they were fairly young at that time, and I'd already bought a Nintendo and a PlayStation. It was like, I haven't got money to, I was a struggling actor, and I didn't have the money to buy an Xbox. So for the longest time, I just gave the games to my son, who later told me that he had sold them on eBay
Ugh.
because I guess he had no way to play them either. It's like, oh, real good. I could have done that. Eventually, somebody asked me if I would play with them, and I did. And so I got a chance to see what it was about. For the longest time, I didn't know what the story of the game was because my work was shouting all those, red team, go, blue team, go, stuff like that, and all the kill streak stuff. And so the story was something I only learned about later when I took the trouble to kind of investigate it. And I was amazed, and I understand why there is such an appeal to the game because obviously the story, the characters are, kind of amazing, I think.
Pretty funny that being one of the most iconic voices in the franchise, and you didn't even play it for the longest time. And yet,
Absolutely. I had no way of doing it. And then when I did play it, I had been asked, I was at the Utah Shakespeare Festival performing as an actor. And I was asked by one of the interns if I would come over and have supper with his family. And I said, sure. It was on Sunday because we were, it's in Mormon territory. They were Mormons. So we didn't work on Sunday. It was perfect. Went over, met his parents, delightful people, met his siblings, very, very cool kids. We had supper. It was delicious. And then afterwards, very casually, he said, hey, do you want to go downstairs and play some Halo? Now, remember, I'd never played the game before. So I thought, oh, okay. I thought, how hard can it be? So we went downstairs and there were bean bags for everybody to sit on. One whole wall was a projection screen, and we each had our own, screen as to, for our character. And we all had our own controllers. And so I started my character walking down the hill. And I thought, okay, well, I suppose I should be doing something. And I happened to see a little building. And I thought, well, maybe I should head to the building. I bet that's what I'm supposed to do. So I saw there was a door and I headed to the door. But the closer I got, the more I started to drift slightly away from the door. And I ended up going into a corner in the building and I couldn't get out. I couldn't go right. I couldn't get left. Couldn't figure out how to back myself up. And the other players ended up just shooting me. So my first experience of the game was hearing me say to me, game over. So I'm none too pleased with that, but I got a little better at it over the years, but I still don't have an Xbox. Of course, now you can play online. And I just have, I don't have a lot of time to do that. So,
I love that. Playing Halo for the first time, don't know when you're gonna see yourself, and then it's the loss. You lose in the game, and you hear yourself, game over. I
I
love that.
know. It's like it would be if it were somebody else when I played, it would be different, but nope, it's me.
When you got the role for the first time, did you know
Yeah.
in your contract if they were making more games, or was it more of a
Oh,
thing they'd just call you back if it went well?
That's exactly what happened. In fact, I mean, so far as I know, I don't, it's been so long, obviously, I don't recall that there was any provision for sequels. Um, the way it worked was we did the first game, and after I'd been in the studio for a couple of days, as I recall, because it took us a couple of days to do all the stuff for the first game, because I think they just didn't know what was going to get used and what wasn't going to be used. And at the end of the time, they said, "Okay, Jeff, I think we've got it all." And I went, "Great. Okay. You sure? Nothing else?" And they were like, "Nope, we're good." And I went, "Okay, thanks. See you later." On some other project. I had no expectation that this was going to become a series. And in fact, it was a couple of years later that I get a call one day from my agent, same agent. And she says, "Hey, you got a call from the folks at Microsoft. They want you to come in and do the sequel to Halo." To which my response was, "So it must have done pretty well, huh?" I mean, I didn't know. And of course, it was only later. I think it was after the second game came out. I happened to see an article in the New York Times that said that Halo had made $175 million
Wow.
in the first day that it was on sale in the US alone. So I
That's
thought,
crazy.
this is like all over the world. And it's like, well, I should certainly be getting paid better than I'm being paid. I mean, crazy. But that's when I started to realize, oh, this is really kind of a big deal. And then over the years, I would occasionally meet somebody who would sort of figure out that, I was a voice actor, and they might say, you sound like you might be a voice actor. Are you a voice actor? And I go, yeah, I am. And they'd say, well, what have you done? And I said, well, I'm involved in this game. I do a game called Halo. And they might perk up and go like, what do you do? And I'd say, well, I'm the announcer for the multiplayer version. I say like double kill, triple kill. And people would freak out. And I'd be like, oh, it's okay, you know. But I mean, I've had people standing in front of me shaking and not being able to, look me in the eye and suddenly lose their ability to speak. And I thought, really? I mean, I didn't realize it was a big deal. I had no idea for the longest time.
Crazy how big of a hit it was. And it must have been a surprise.
Oh,
Must have been a surprise for you when you did one, you did two, and then you're doing three, four, and you just kept going and you kept being called back.
yeah, there was always a fear on my part that, they would finally go, all right, that's enough of him. And that they would try to replace me, which they did try to do at one point. They were, I think, planning to replace me when 343 took over, but then they didn't for whatever reason. They were going to replace both Steve and Jen, and then they didn't do that either. Um, Somebody else did all the actual motion capture for Jen, which normally she would do. But then they decided that because they did some test uh, um, screenings of the game, and people said, yeah, it's a great game, but that's not Cortana. So they had to bring Jen in to voice Cortana. And what was crazy was the other actress had already done all the mouth movement. So Jen had to basically do ADR for her own character, which she did. And I think probably quite brilliantly because she's really good at what she does. But yeah, so that's, I've always thought, this has been great. And if it ends, which it could at any time, I would imagine, it's like it will have been an amazing thing to be a part of.
What was your favorite line, like your most favorite line to record out of all the ones that you've done?
Well, the one that I like to say the most, for not necessarily obvious reasons, is unfreaking believable. I like that one. And the reason I like it is because it's fun to say because of the K's in frickin'. A lot of people think it's friggin', and in fact, we may have changed that. For the first several games, I'm almost positive that we were saying unfrickin' believable. And then I remember going in and I had the lines and it was friggin', and I said, I don't think we don't do friggin'. We've been doing frickin'. And they were like, well, we're going to do friggin'. And I was like, okay. So I think we may have changed. I suppose I probably do both, but I prefer doing it with the K's just because frickin', you can get a more of a click to the sound, which I obviously enjoy doing. That's probably my favorite of the lines that I've had. Although there have been other things I've loved saying, brains, stuff like that.
Did you
That's fun to do.
did you get to have much freedom or like add your own
Oh,
interpretation? Or was it just laid out for you?
no, here's how the way we would record it, Dale. It would initially, when I would go in, I'd go into a little booth about the size, not a lot bigger than a phone booth used to be, something that no longer exists. But it was about the size of a phone booth, probably about 3.5 by 3.5 feet, 7 feet tall. And there'd be a window in front of me through which I could see into the other room where the engineer and the writer were. And then in front of me, there would be a music stand and the copy, all the words I was going to say, the sheets of paper were all on the music stand, and there was a light. And if I wanted to sit, I could, although I tended to like to stand because I like to use a little body English when I'm doing stuff. I don't want to feel like you know, am too sedentary. So we would go through line by line, generally in sequences. So let's say I'm doing all the kill streaks. I do double kill, but I do it 3 times. So it'd be like double kill, double kill, double kill, something like that. And generally, what I would hear would be the writer going, number 2. And that's the one that they would keep. And then I'd go, all right, Jeff, let's go to the next one. Triple kill, triple kill, triple kill. All right, I'm going to keep number 3. And we go through everything that way. So I get down to the bottom of it. Sometimes I seem to recall initially when I was doing it, we'd do like a whole sequence. Like I'd do all the kill streaks. And they would say, okay, let's go back to line 6, which might be killing spree. Can we get 3 more of those? But I always did 3. And then they would, sort of check them and choose them as we went along. And I'd get to the bottom of the page, and then I'd throw the page away, and we go on to the second page. And I would just keep doing it that way until we were done. We'd take a break about once an hour, and they'd always say, do you need to stop for a bit? And I'd either say, yeah, I need a little bit of a breather, because being in a box with not a lot of great ventilation, you can't have the air conditioning on while you're recording because it would pick it up. Or it's like, do you need more water? Do you want some tea or coffee or anything? And I generally opt for water, and that'd be it. Um, and we just keep going until we had everything done. And I was booked in 4-hour sessions. So they tried to get everything done in 4 hours. And more often than not, after a while, I would go in and, whip through it and be done in an hour, just because we'd done it so much.
Chris in chat said this is great. Referring to your doing your lines again. Also, if you did the 1 hour, did you get paid for the 4 hours still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was paid by the session.
What do you think makes the Halo announcer voice so iconic and memorable? Because I've seen a few answers to this, but I'd love to know as the man himself.
I don't know. I mean, this is I honestly don't know. When I auditioned, everybody auditioned the same way. All the men read Master Chief and Alien, and then everybody had to scream like they were being massacred. That was the last thing you did because they didn't want you to, do that and then try and do the lines. The women all read Cortana and then had to scream like they were being massacred. So there was a period of time when I was under the impression that I was going to be playing Master Chief. That's what my agent told me. And then Marty has since sort of insisted that no, with that, it hadn't been an offer. They had considered it, but they decided to go with Steve. So when we went in to work on the voice, he said, okay, now you did the Master Chief, and they'd always said, do it like Clint Eastwood. So you were sort of, doing it kind of breathy like that. And it's like, okay, let's take a little of that. He said, can you do Monster Truck Rally? Monster Truck Rally. And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, let's pull that back a little bit and add that sort of, Clint Eastwood going Monster Truck Rally. And he said, the alien, can you put a little of the alien had a little bit more of that kind of feeling. And before I knew it, after about 20 minutes, he said, I think we got it. And so it wasn't like, I thought this is gonna, get exciting for people. It was just something I was asked to do. And it always amazed me once I was aware that there were fans and started to hear from them or read things they said they really liked it. It so much of this is good fortune and luck on the part of the people who put the game together, Marty and all the engineers like Jay Windland, and they were amazing people. And they're the ones who said, this is the person we're looking for. Marty had known Steve, but it was like, I think that's the guy who should be Master Chief. And he was right. It's like, can you imagine? I mean, I can't, I can't imagine anybody else but him doing it. And same with Jen. It's like, no, that's the voice. David Scully, who is Johnson. It's kind of like, who else could do that? It's not like we, had to work to create the voices so much. We already had those qualities in us. We were lucky, you know. So no, I don't know. To answer your question, what it is specifically that is appealing to people about what I do in the game. I'm just so glad that people like it, you know?
Better to be loved than do something bad in the game and everyone hates you all of a sudden, But
Yeah.
speaking of this,
Not everybody thinks that the voice is that cool. I've read a couple of things online that are like, what's wrong with you people? That guy stinks. And it's like, oh, okay, well,
let them have their opinions. I reckon the 1,000 other people who
everyone do.
the 1,000 other people who said you're great, I feel like in comparison, it's actually making me want to play Halo again because the last week I've been playing Halo just for this interview, just to get my Halo knowledge and get up again. Now it's making me want to play Halo after this.
Well, I mean, it's when I got to know sort of the story, and sort of followed some of the cinematics in the game, I was so impressed with, a lot of what was going down. I mean, the whole fall of Reach and, all the stuff when Cortana and Chief get separated and eventually find their way back to each other. And then Cortana goes rogue. And I mean, it's just really good sci-fi stuff, and then you're in there battling away, going through all of those incredible adventures. It's a pretty cool game. I think,
No bias or anything, but I'd love to know, what is your favorite Halo out of the ones you have played?
Well, I have to say that in some ways my favorite game, I like most of them, I think, pretty well. I often said 3 because that was the last one that I got to do with Marty, but actually it's probably 1 because I did the most amount of work in the studio for 1. Plus, nobody knew what we were doing. It's like we came up with a voice. We were trying that for the first time. I think I got a lot more lines, many of which probably didn't make it into the game, simply because, again, it's kind of like, well, we might need this, we might not need this, So I got to do a lot more of it. And then, of course, it was just the first one, sort of like, which of the various Star Wars movie is your favorite? For me, it was the first one, even though I love Empire Strikes Back. It may be a better movie, but the original Star Wars, as far as I'm concerned, is perfect, and it's the first one I saw. So everything about it was like, whoa, Same with Indiana Jones, all those first movies. It's like, whoa, first Die Hard, any of those things. So in some ways, I think because we were all going off on this journey together, the first one will always have a very special place in my heart. Now, I think that Steve says five, and I think Jen may agree with him about that, you know. And I have to say, I did have an awful lot of fun. I did a chapter for Halo Infinite. I guess they were adding content after the game premiered because it was about a year later they called me in and I was part of a story where my character, and I guess I'm a character. I'd always thought, no, I'm the announcer. I'm not a
You're
character. I don't
just
have any
God.
physical
You're just
characteristics.
the Halo God, as everyone calls you.
Exactly, exactly. And but they said your character is being taken over by this, malevolent AI. And it was like, okay, sounds like fun. And it was, getting it's like, can you be like Hal in 2001 when the computer, ends up dying into Daisy, Daisy, all that stuff. Had me doing a little Max headroom, room, stuff. It was great fun to play with.
What do you think of the Halo TV series?
Um, well, it was interesting because I think the Halo TV series really changed between season one and season two. Certainly in terms of the feel and the look of it. Um, because in the first season, it felt to me like an old TV series, not the reboot that came out, but the original Battlestar Galactica, which was a little bit like Star Trek, which is to say nobody ever got very dirty for all the fighting they were doing and running around on planets and stuff. Everything stayed pretty clean, and I felt that way about Halo in the first season. Um, and then in the second season, it was much grittier and darker and sort of spookier. And I was a little bit disappointed in the second season because it took so long to bring back Cortana. And I was confused by the way she looked because she looked like somebody's little sister from a situation comedy back in the 1980s. It was very odd. Didn't quite understand that. Um, I don't think it could ever really succeed in a way, the way people would have hoped it would, mostly because it's like the Lord of the Rings. If you're really a big Lord of the Rings fan, is, amazing as much of what Peter Jackson did, or a Dune fan, whatever you may think about David Lynch or Denis Villeneuve, their versions of it. The fact of the matter is, if you've read the books, if you, are really conversant with the original Harry Potter, same thing. It's like that's what it's supposed to be. But everybody has their own idea of what that should look like, sound like, you know? Um, Pablo Schreiber is a terrific actor. And, I'm just so used to a more grizzled take because that's Steve, you know. And the fact that they had him taking his helmet off all the time, and eventually the whole second season, he was hardly ever in his outfit, was strange because in the game, the fact that you don't see his face is what allows you to be him. You know, he's your avatar. And that sort of disappears when it's like, well, shoot, I don't look like Pablo Schreiber, or sound like him, or. And I think that was a problem. It's one of the things about The Mandalorian. I remember when Pedro Pascal was doing that, I thought, what a weird job. Is he really inside that? I'm sure it's a stunt guy. And he's just saying the lines in a recording studio. Pretty good gig. But there was something about it because you could sort of imagine whatever you wanted to imagine The Mandalorian looked like. And I think that probably is what people were expecting from Halo and didn't see happen.
I love when,
So.
like, in shows like that, when they're wearing the suit or this armor and then they take a helmet off and they're not sweating at all. Like, surely you'd get really hot wearing all that gear.
Absolutely.
Like, surely the house had no sweat on you at all. Like,
Absolutely.
I sit.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, are just like, that would be so disgusting to see sweaty actors. It's like, well, yeah, but for the people who play this, part of the appeal is that I think it is real for the people who play the game. I mean, you go back and see some of the earlier games and they look by today's standards fairly simplistic. At the time, it was unbelievable. You'd never seen a game that was quite like that or that you could move through in a 3D way. But now it's just, the detail, and the 3D quality is staggering. So people have that model in their heads. And, when they weren't getting that in the TV series, I think they were a little frustrated. Some people were. People who had not played Halo were, I think, much happier with the series than people who did know it.
Now, I know that moving on from Halo, I know that you have been in the Grand Theft Auto series twice. I know that you made an appearance in Vice City, I think it was, and then you also
Yeah.
did one in Grand Theft Auto Online.
Yeah, I think the online one is the same stuff. I only recorded the one time for them. I was living in New York and I got a call. It was an offer, which is, normally you audition. But they just asked me if I would be in this Grand Theft Auto. I said, sure. So what that entailed was for those people who play the game, they will know that when you're driving around in the car, you can change the channel on the radio to a number of different kinds of stations. One of the stations that's on there in the game that I was in is an old time radio station. And so I was in there to record an episode of a mystery that was on the old time radio show. That's my participation in the show. And they had me playing two characters. We were set up the way you would have been back in the 1930s and 40s when people were doing radio plays, which is to say, everybody sort of was at their own microphone, pointed in different directions. If you imagine a square room and each of us was in a corner with a microphone facing us so it didn't pick up the other people, right? And we had our scripts with us, and we did it all through in one take. We didn't stop and start or do it separately like you sometimes do for a radio drama. I mean, it was done just like an old-fashioned radio drama, and I played two characters, so I had to start out in the beginning playing kind of a chief of police kind of a guy, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was something like kind of a guy like that, as I recall. And then I had to play this sort of fisherman, who sounded like he was from New England area, sort of like that. There's a wonderful actor whose son is a friend of mine, Doug Hughes. His name was Barney Hughes, who used to be in films and TV. So I was basically just doing him. So I had to switch between them, in the course of this drama, which was great fun. But I've never played Grand Theft Auto, so I haven't actually heard myself in that. It would be fun.
Now I think you have to play Grand Theft Auto. If you've done Halo, you got to do GTA.
Evidently, I do. Well, yeah, I think that's true. I've also got other friends. I got a friend in New York that I worked with on stage who does actually play one of the people who is in the game, more extended. One of the things that's been fun about going to conventions, which I do now, is meeting people who do parts in other games. One of our actors is a guy named Bruce Thomas, who's the motion capture Master Chief. Fabulous guy.
It is so funny you mentioned that name. I was actually meant to interview him a couple days ago. Unfortunately, due to the LA fires, there's been a lot of interviews postponed, which is happy to postpone it because it is nuts what's going on over there.
I totally forgot about Bruce being there. Of course he is.
I know.
I should talk to him.
I remember I woke up in the middle of the night because most of my interviews are usually at 6, 7 in the morning, and being in Australia, and I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw I had an Instagram message. I'm like, who the hell is messaging me at 3 in the morning? And it's Bruce Thomas basically just saying that he can't do it because he's got hurricane winds, and I'm like, that is okay. I understand.
That's a good excuse. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's hopefully everyone's okay, and in the future we'll get to do it for the first time.
Oh, he is just the best guy. I didn't know who he was. I mean, I knew he was the motion capture Master Chief. And we all, when we go out, we have these sort of big posters that are behind us that we stand in front of that have like are credits on them, like graphics from the games. So one day I thought, I wonder what he's done. So I wandered on down. I was like, holy cow! He was in Legally Blonde. He played this boyfriend to Jennifer Coolidge in
Oh,
that. He played a
UPS guy.
guy. Unbelievable. And then he was in Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, I think it was. He played one of these little Bruce Campbells running around. It was like, what? And then he also is in Call of Duty. He's got like a big, big
Yeah,
role in Call of Duty,
he's
you
Adler.
know?
Yeah, he
I mean, I was impressed after, I read all that. I was like, holy cow. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff. It's very impressive.
moving on from that, I'd love to know
Sure.
because you go to conventions and all that, and I'd love to
I
know
do.
what kind of two in one. What is the most memorable fan interaction you've ever had? But what was also the
Oh,
funniest fan interaction you've ever had?
well, let me start with the funniest one. The funniest one was it was what happened was I was in where was it? Cleveland, I believe. And there's this group that cosplays in Halo outfits. And when I walked in, we walked past them and they said, if you get a chance, stop by and say hello. And I thought, I will. And I came back a little bit later and got to meet everybody. We had a picture taken and everything. And then they said, would you do a favor for us? Would you autograph something? And I said, sure. What do you want autographed? And they said, our warthog. And they had taken a golf cart and adapted it and made it into a warthog. And I said, well, where do you want me to sign it? I said it would help if there was someplace relatively flat, because that's the hardest thing about doing autographs. I get helmets all the time, and they're so hard to autograph. It's like, and you don't want to mess it up because it's going to be this possession that people want to be proud of. Well, so they tipped it up, and I ended up autographing it on the underside of the cart. That was one of the funniest things that I encountered. The perhaps the most memorable, I'll never forget this because I've heard this more than once from people, but this might have been the most impactful one. I was in Phoenix, and this kid came up and he said he had something he wanted me to autograph and he wanted to get his picture taken. And he said, I just have to tell you that when I was young, I was horribly abused uh, by my father. And he was just brutal. He was just always, hitting me and beating me up and stuff. And it was hell. He said, and the only way I could escape that was I could go to my room and lock myself in, and I would play Halo for hours and listen to your voice. And it saved my life. And I was so gobsmacked. I, it was just like, Jesus. And I said, you're not still living there now? And he said, no, no. When I turned 18, I left immediately. And he said, we were taking the pictures. Would you mind if I just gave you a hug? And I said, no, not at all. And I've heard similar stories, nothing quite as graphic as his was, but I have heard from a number of people. It's like I had a really tough childhood. People made fun of me. I wasn't a popular person. I didn't have social skills, no friends, whatever it was. And this game helped see me through that really tough time. And for that alone, I am so proud to be a part of the game, knowing what it's meant to people. I mean, a lot of people, it's just, we had the best time. We took over the computer lab and, our teacher didn't know about it. And we had a huge LAN party. We hooked them all up together. And, we used to do that all the time, or we'd sneak over to somebody's house saying we're going to do something and then stay up all night for 3 days and, play the game and stuff. And I love all those stories. It's, it's that it's meant so much to other people that now means so much to me, because most of the work you do as an actor, you don't know what kind of an impact it has. It may have none. It may have an impact that you never find out about. You know, when I'm doing a play, I mean, we get applause at the end of the show, but that's kind of de rigueur, you know. Some nights you can go, oh, they really liked it, but it's not like this. It's not like you meet every audience member individually, you know. And going to conventions is like meeting everybody individually, seeing the range of backgrounds, the range of experiences. Um, you know, it's why I go, and I love it. I love meeting fans. Jen Taylor has been very, very good about reminding me, basically because she's had more experience. She's been going out longer than I have. Um, sort of how to interact with fans. Because, for instance, there was one talk back and I was saying, it's like, I just got lucky, you know. I mean, it could have been anybody. And she said, Jeff, you don't say that. That's not what people want to hear. You know, they really like you. And it's like, well, I guess it couldn't just be anybody, could it? You know, just like it couldn't be for her, for Steve. And, it's a kind of probably, pointless modesty. It's like, no, 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 own it. You know what I mean? You're in a game that people love and you're doing a job that people really are very, very happy with. So it's like, enjoy it.
I'm
But
just
that's sort of not in my nature.
had a bit of a giggle there because imagine, you're going in for the first time and you're like, surely, it's just a role, I'm just screaming double kill, I'm just doing these things. And now it is one of the most iconic voices of all time. And people refer to you as the god of Halo, and there's such a community around it. And it's funny because at the start, you this guy just going through and screaming that people are getting kills, And it's
Yeah.
like,
No, my favorite example of that, I think, whatever game it was where we started doing this, I remember at one point I got the line zombie killing spree. And I went, excuse me, wait a second. So there are zombies in this game? And they were like, uh-huh. And I said, well, can you give me a little bit more information about that? And they were like, no. It's like, okay, you know,
fair enough.
I,
Fair enough.
they didn't tell me, but it was never a problem because it was so much fun to do, you know. There were sequences that were a little bit tricky, like, 30 seconds remaining, 15 seconds remaining, it's where you'd be going through that. And it was fairly straightforward. And, they wanted it to be, a little bit more exciting as it got down to 1 minute remaining, or whatever it was. That was somewhat more laborious, but other thing, come on, splatters, spree, that's fun to say. I didn't know what it meant.
Did you get any lines that were funny at the time but didn't make it into the final cut?
Oh, yes, there were. There's one that I don't say. It's sort of comparable to "you stink." You can imagine what it was.
Yeah.
And the only reason I don't say it, and people are asking me to say that all the time to people, and I'd love to be able to do it because I certainly have no problem saying it in real life, but because it was cut from the game, we recorded that, and then it was cut from the game. They wouldn't use it, and I thought, oh, well, so then probably I shouldn't go around saying it, because that would maybe be awkward for the folks at Microsoft. But the other one, I don't know why I decided this one was okay, but there was one line. It's one of my favorite lines. It's my other favorite line in some ways. It's and some people may have heard this story because I love to tell it. But basically, there was a situation some years ago when Dick Cheney, the vice president, was out in a hunting trip, and he shot a fellow hunter in the face. Yeah. Now the other hunter was okay, but it was like, it made the news. So the writers for the game, and I can't remember which game it was. I think it might have been 3. Said we've got a line we want you to say, and this line is something that the fans will hear if they shoot their own player. And the line was Cheney Mania. I thought was hysterical. We all did. And in fact, they made me do it a number of times, not because I'd not done it right the first time, they just howled with laughter, to hear me say it. And it was even not going to be like every time. It was going to be like every 100 times you'd hear it. So they tried to bury it. Well, somebody from Microsoft found out what they were up to, and they were like, no, no. And I'm sure it was like, we don't want to appear to be taking sides or to be political or anything like that. So we're in this imaginary world, this, fantasy world. So you can't bring in, contemporary figures. So they were like, no, can't do it. But I loved saying it. It made me laugh. I was terribly disappointed when it didn't make it into the game. So now, whenever I can, I love to tell that story because it allows me to say Cheney Mania.
I think that'd be pretty funny. There could, I don't know if you could do this, but I'm pretty sure modders can put voice lines into the game, so it could be something a modder could do.
Yeah, I suspect you can. It just recently, and I don't quite understand what this was, but I think they released something like 1,300 of my lines from the other games, so that if players wanted to stick them into Infinite, they could. I think that's what happened. Um, when I recorded them, that was the end of it. They didn't call me and say, "Hey, this is going to happen." I read about this online, and it was like, "Oh, okay,
Fair enough.
yeah,
Maybe
sure."
one day someone will see this video and be like, I want to put that voice line into Halo. And they put it into Halo and then they just they tweet at you or something.
I don't know. I don't. It's one of those things. It's like I get it. I get why they would do that. That why they would maybe think that for a lot of reasons it wasn't appropriate. But again, no, I was never, you asked me, I think the beginning of all this was, did you have any input? And it's like, no. Did I have any say about how I said things? Not really. I would give them options. They would choose the one they liked. It wasn't like me going, take number 2. That's the one that should be in the game. Very often it wasn't that one. And I never, that we didn't stop and discuss it. We had too much work to do and it wasn't my place. That would be like being an audiobook narrator and saying, well, I think the way this is written is not quite, I would say it like this. You don't do that,
Nope.
Servant to the project is the way I look at it. Interpreter. Yeah.
This is actually a good question. Chris wants to know favorite bit of Halo merch you own or favorite collectible in general?
Oh, well, I don't own a lot of merch. Unlike Steve Downs, who has a wall of stuff that he has collected. There are a couple of things that I like. One of them I was given. One of them no, both I was given. Here's what happened. I was was it in Cleveland? Might have been Cleveland. There were people doing 3D figures, and they had a 3D figure of Buddha with Master Chief's head. And I thought, oh, this is incredible. Buddha's sitting cross-legged with his big tummy and stuff. But then it was, Master Chief's head. So I bought it to give to Steve. And it took me forever to get it to him. I was going to get it to him last spring when we appeared together, but I forgot to bring it down to the event from Seattle. It was just down in Tacoma or Portland, or I can't remember where, Tacoma. And then it took almost till last November to get it to him, but I finally did. And I mentioned this to somebody in an interview, and they had a copy of it and they sent it to me. So now I've got my own copy, and I'm very happy to have that of the Buddha Master Chief. And then the other thing I loved was I think it was in Phoenix. They had these posters that were 3D posters, a couple of them that, people could buy and I would sign and stuff. And I remember I said it to somebody, I said, these are amazing. How much are you selling these for? And they said, well, just take a couple. And it's like, really? And it's like, well, yeah, you could. So I grabbed a couple of those and I have them. And I'm very, very happy to have them. They're very cool.
Imagine still keeping that copy of Halo 1 that you got many years ago and still having it. You could put it in a little display case and everything.
Well, I actually had something happen. I celebrate Christmas with a group of friends every year. And we do a thing. It got to the point where we were giving presents and people were spending way too much money and we're old and, we're living on pensions and social security and stuff. And so we thought, okay, we're going to do a Secret Santa. We're going to do that kind of a thing. So last year, the son of one of my friends got my name and he found Halo 1 and 2 and gave me copies of the original games that he'd found online. And it was like, oh my God, thank you so much. This is so cool. So I have those as well. Again, no way to play them, but it's still cool to have them, you know.
Hey, if anyone's watching, get him an Xbox so we can just play those. Get him an
There you
Xbox.
go.
Yep.
That few fans really cared you'd get me an Xbox.
Yeah.
I learned how to play on Stream or, wherever it's playing. Is it Apple or someplace you can play games on? I'm not even sure where all it is. Part of the problem is that um I have, I guess I've got some desktops and I've got a mouse. Normally I just use the touchpad, which might be a little hard to figure out how to make that work. The other thing I should do is at one of the conferences, Marty O'Donnell said, I can teach you how to play this game really well in 2 hours. And I thought I should go to Las Vegas where he lives and take him up on that, and
What?
then start going online and dropping in and messing with the players who are playing online. That would be fun. Because every once in a while people says, why don't you come and play with us? And it's kind of like, nah, you don't want me coming and playing with you. Right now I'm really not very good. But if I got better, it'd be kind of fun to do.
I feel like every actor who's in America has done an episode of Law and Order, and you have.
Yes.
What
Yes.
What was that experience like for you?
It was fantastic. I loved it. Part of it was great about it was that because they knew they were going to hire me, they didn't know when they were going to use me. They hired me by the week, which was a really nice paycheck. I think it was like $10,000 or something for a very small appearance in this one episode. But I had originally 3 scenes. So I was there right after, they have the opening scene where you find out about the crime, and then they have the introduction and the first commercial, and then they had the first scene. I think that's when I appeared. I can't remember. But I had a scene with Esapatha Murkison, who was it was the original Mother, they called it the Mothership series. So I had a scene with her, and then later they called me in to interview me. The cops have, because I want to get more information. And I am using the bathroom and I come out with a magazine, and it's like a People magazine. And in this magazine is the person I saw committing the crime because they're like a celebrity. I did that with Jesse, uh, oh, what was Jesse's last name? The Alyssa Milano, I think she was the other cop then. And then I was on The Stand, and that got cut for time. They cut my appearance on The Stand where I'm kind of, you know, um, discredited by, or, I'm sort of neutralized by the defense. But I got to be interviewed by Sam Waterston, which was incredibly cool. And we did a couple of things, and I had one line that they had me do a couple of times. And the last time I sort of glanced over to Sam, and Sam was like, and it's like, well, it's just the coolest thing that's ever happened. So it was great. I had a wonderful, wonderful time. It was weird because what happens there is that they always say it's like, that's it for Jeff. Thanks so much, Jeff. And it's like, thanks. And then you cease to exist. I mean, the walk out of the building and going home, it's like, but I had costumes, and I've had to leave my costumes, and it's like a dream. You can't quite believe that you spent the better part of a week, doing this gig. It was great. It was really great.
This is very unrelated, but have you ever been to Australia?
No, I never have. And part number one, because I've never had a reason to go. If I had a reason to go, I would go. Partly also, I'm a terrible flyer. I don't like to fly. And as you know, it's kind of a long flight.
It's a very long flight.
As it turns out, until recently, I had some very good friends who lived in Melbourne, and she was an actress. He did a lot of different things, but he worked like in a gym as a trainer, and they have since moved to Singapore, I believe. Something came up for him, and so they moved there. And then in Sydney, um, there is an actor that I did Mary Poppins with on Broadway, Adam John Fiorentino, and we've stayed in touch. You know, I always send him birthday greetings on his birthday, and I keep track of shows he's in. He's been in a lot of shows there. So yeah, so I've got good reason to go. I've just never have, you know.
Love to know what actually got you on Cameo.
My niece first mentioned it to me, and she said, "Uncle Jeff, there's this thing called Cameo, and you ought to get on it. You'd do really well on there." And I thought, "Oh, okay, what is this?" And she said, "You do personalized videos." And I probably went to the site and I checked it out, and I thought, "Yeah, I guess maybe I'll think about it." And of course, what that means always is like, I'll think about it means I'll put it off as long as I possibly can because doing anything about it is work, and I'm being horribly lazy. And so the way it worked out was it was during the pandemic, and I, couldn't bring any income in. I mean, I had thank God, my Social Security and my pensions from three unions, the directors union, because I've directed a lot of stage plays, the stage actors union equity, and AFTRA, which is the voice actors union. It's now SAG-AFTRA. They sort of combined. But then I thought maybe I should, rethink this and see if this could actually happen. So I wrote to the people at Cameo, and they just jumped on it. I mean, they were like, "Absolutely, we'd love to have you." And it was like, "Okay, great." And I started doing them. And number one, I found I really enjoyed them. They were a lot of fun. And it was a way of getting to sort of, if not, in physically, you didn't see the person you were doing a cameo for, but generally you were given information about people, you know. And I always found that incredibly interesting. It's like meeting people at conventions, you know. It's just a glimpse into other people's lives. And maybe because I'm sort of at heart an actor, that's the job, is getting into the skin of other people, generally fictional characters, but it's based on your observation of just people in life. I've always been interested in people. So yeah, it's
Think,
cool.
do you get any like funny requests now and again?
Not necessarily. Yes. Some are funny. There was one just recently. I can't think what it was, but all the things they asked me, it's like I don't know what I'm saying, but it's making me chuckle. I don't know what this is, but it made me laugh.
I think the funniest one I saw, because I saw a couple of your cameos that people have posted online, and the funniest one was this guy was doing a burrito recipe, but you did the voiceover for the burrito recipe.
Did I? I
So,
don't remember doing that, but that's hysterical.
so as he would do some of the ingredients,
Well, you know what? I do vaguely remember
and then
this.
you'd come in and give a little note, and you'd do your voice, and you'd say something about the burrito or the wrapping, and you'd be like, it's just.
I do vaguely remember that. That was I think a while ago, if I'm not mistaken.
I
That
did
is hysterical.
um
That is hysterical.
I did laugh about that. I did have a bit of a laugh about that. So,
Oh
but
yeah. Yeah.
honestly, I have no more questions. Honestly, I think you've answered all my questions pretty good. Honestly.
Well, I'm glad.
All right, Jeff. Well, I just want to say thank you for answering all my questions in today's interview. I've had an absolute blast.
It has
Oh,
been a pleasure.
so
I've had so much fun. I really appreciate your calling, you reaching out to me and asking me to do this. It's been a treat. Thank
awesome.
you.
Well, I hope you have an awesome day, and thank you so much for the interview, Matt.
Have a great 2025.
You too.